Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cold metal wall of her cell and tried not to cry. The 16-year-old girl had been so excited just 3 days ago when the research ship Endeavour reached the edge of Zephyrian space. She was the youngest xenobiologist ever chosen for a first contact mission, and her parents had been so proud. Now she wished she had never left Earth. The Zephyrians looked like tall, thin humans covered in blue-gray skin. Their faces were too long, and their eyes were black pools that seemed to swallow light. When they first met the human diplomatic team, they had smiled with too many teeth and spoken in voices that sounded like wind through broken glass. "Welcome, primitive ones," their leader had said. "We are honored to meet such simple creatures." Captain Williams had tried to stay calm during the first meeting. He explained that humans came in peace and wanted to trade knowledge and resources. The Zephyrians had nodded and agreed to show them around their massive space station. Sarah remembered walking through the gleaming corridors, amazed by the advanced technology. The walls seemed to be made of living metal that shifted colors. Strange plants grew from the ceiling without soil or water. Everything was beautiful and alien and wonderful. Then the trap had closed. It happened so fast that Sarah barely understood what was occurring. One moment she was examining a fascinating crystal formation with Dr. Martinez, and the next moment, metal restraints shot out from the walls. The Zephyrians had been waiting for the right moment to strike. "Take the young one," their leader had commanded. "She will provide the most interesting data." Sarah had screamed as they dragged her away from the other humans. She could hear Captain Williams shouting demands and threats, but the Zephyrians just laughed. The sound was like breaking glass mixed with static electricity. They threw her into a small cell with smooth walls and no windows. A single light panel in the ceiling provided dim illumination. There was a metal bench attached to one wall and a small hole in the floor that she quickly realized was meant to be a toilet. The air smelled like chemicals and something else she could not identify. For the first day, Sarah had banged on the walls and shouted until her voice was raw. No one came except a machine that pushed a tray of strange food through a slot in the door. The food looked like gray paste and tasted worse than it looked, but she was hungry enough to eat it. On the second day, they came for her. 2 Zephyrian guards entered her cell. They wore no expressions on their alien faces, but Sarah could sense their cruel amusement. They grabbed her arms with hands that felt too cold and too strong. "Time for the examination, little primitive," one of them said. They dragged her through corridors filled with other cells. Sarah saw glimpses of her fellow crew members through small windows in the doors. Dr. Martinez looked unconscious. Captain Williams was shouting something she could not hear. The sight of her friends trapped and helpless made her stomach twist with fear. The examination room was white and sterile, like a hospital operating room. But instead of medical equipment, it was filled with devices that looked more like torture instruments, sharp needles, spinning blades, and things that hummed with dangerous energy. A Zephyrian in a long coat stood waiting for them. This one was different from the others. Its eyes held intelligence and something that might have been curiosity. When it spoke, its voice was softer but somehow more frightening. "Ah, the young specimen," it said. "I am researcher Veltar. You will help us learn about human biology and psychology." Sarah tried to be brave. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm not a specimen. I'm a person." Veltar tilted its head like a bird studying an insect. "Fascinating. It believes it has individual identity. This will make the experiments more interesting." What followed was the worst day of Sarah's life. They strapped her to a cold metal table and began their tests. They took blood samples with needles that seemed designed to cause maximum pain. They attached electrodes to her head and sent jolts of electricity through her brain while monitoring her reactions. The worst part was not the physical pain, though that was terrible. The worst part was that they were enjoying it. Veltar and its assistants took notes and made comments as if Sarah was nothing more than a laboratory animal. They discussed her responses to pain like scientists studying an interesting chemical reaction. "Note how the primitive vocalizes when subjected to neural stimulation," Veltar said as Sarah screamed. "The frequency suggests a complex pain response system. Should we increase the intensity?" asked an assistant. "Yes, I want to map the full range of human suffering." Hours passed like years. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness as they continued their cruel experiments. Sometimes she dreamed she was back home in California, sitting in her father's garden while her mother made tea. Then she would wake up to find herself still strapped to the table with alien faces staring down at her. When they finally returned her to her cell, Sarah could barely walk. Her whole body ached, and her mind felt foggy from whatever drugs they had given her. She collapsed on the metal bench and tried to make sense of what was happening. This was not supposed to be how first contact worked. In all the movies and books, alien civilizations were either friendly or openly hostile. They did not pretend to be peaceful and then tortured children for fun. The third day brought a new horror. Feltar visited her cell personally, along with several other Zephyrians she had not seen before. "We have decided to share our research with the rest of our empire," Feltar announced. "Your suffering will be broadcast across our civilization as both entertainment and education." Sarah felt her blood turn cold. "You can't do that." "Of course we can, little primitive. Your species exists for our amusement. Soon billions of my people will watch as we explore the limits of human endurance." They set up recording equipment in her cell and in the examination room. Every moment of pain, every cry of fear, every tear that rolled down her face would be transmitted across space for aliens to watch and enjoy. But Sarah was smarter than they thought she was. While they focused on their equipment, she managed to activate the emergency beacon hidden in her shoe. It was a tiny device that all crew members carried, designed to send a distress signal to Earth in case of extreme emergency. Her fingers shook as she programmed a message into the beacon's memory chip. She had only seconds before the Zephyrians noticed what she was doing. "This is Sarah Chen aboard the Endeavor. We are prisoners of the Zephyrians. They are torturing us for entertainment. Location coordinates follow. Please help us. Please make them pay for this." She managed to send the signal just as Veltar turned around. The alien researcher's black eyes narrowed as it noticed the small device in Sarah's hand. "Clever little primitive," it said, taking the beacon away from her. "But it does not matter. Your message will take months to reach your pathetic planet. By then, we will have learned everything we need to know about your species." Veltar crushed the beacon under its foot, but Sarah smiled through her tears. The message was already gone, racing through space toward Earth at faster than light speed. The Zephyrians had made a terrible mistake. They thought humans were weak and primitive and alone. They were about to learn how wrong they were. As the aliens dragged her back to the examination room for another session of torture, Sarah held on to one thought. Earth would receive her message. Earth would come for her. And Earth would make the Zephyrians regret the day they decided to hurt a human child. Admiral Kane stood in the communication center deep beneath Geneva, staring at the screen that had just changed his world. The message from Sarah Chen had arrived 3 hours ago, and he had read it 17 times. Each time, the words made him angrier. Kane was an old man now, with gray hair and scars from wars most people preferred to forget. He had been 25 when the resource wars ended, 38 during the AI rebellion, and 52 when they finally put down the Mars insurrection. He had helped design Protocol 7, hoping it would never be needed. Now it seemed that hope had been foolish. "Sir," said Lieutenant Torres, the young officer manning the communication station, "the President is on line 1. She wants to discuss diplomatic options." Kane almost laughed. Diplomatic options, as if there was any point in talking to creatures that tortured children for fun. "Tell the President I'll call her back. Right now, I have more important work to do." He walked through corridors that most government officials did not even know existed. The Terran Defense Authority had been built after the Mars insurrection, when humanity realized it needed something stronger than regular armies. The surface levels housed normal military operations. The deeper levels contained humanity's darkest secrets. Kane's destination was level 12, the deepest part of the facility. As he descended in the high-speed elevator, he thought about the men and women sleeping in the darkness below. They were volunteers, every one of them. Soldiers who had fought in humanity's worst conflicts and lived through things that would have broken lesser people. When the wars finally ended, these veterans faced a problem. They were too damaged to live normal lives, but too dangerous to simply release into civilian society. Some suffered from trauma that would never heal. Others had been changed by military enhancements that could not be reversed. All of them carried the weight of terrible knowledge about what humans could do to each other when pushed to the limit. Protocol 7 had been the solution. Instead of trying to fix these broken warriors, humanity put them to sleep. They were frozen in special chambers, their bodies preserved and their minds given peace. The plan was simple. If humanity ever faced an enemy that threatened its very existence, these soldiers would wake up and do what they did best. The elevator stopped with a soft chime. Kane stepped out into a corridor lined with thick metal doors. Each door led to a cryogenic chamber containing dozens of sleeping soldiers. Emergency lighting cast long shadows on the walls, and the air hummed with the sound of cooling systems working to keep the chambers at exactly the right temperature. Kane walked to the central control room, where Chief Technician Walsh was already preparing the revival systems. Walsh was one of the few people who knew the full details of Protocol 7. She had been working here for 15 years, maintaining the chambers and waiting for a day she hoped would never come. "How long will it take?" Kane asked. 12 hours for full revival," Walsh replied. "But sir, are you sure about this?" "Once we wake them up, there's no putting them back to sleep until the mission is complete." Kane thought about Sarah Chen, a 16-year-old girl being tortured by aliens for entertainment. He thought about the other crew members of the Endeavor, probably suffering similar fates. He thought about what would happen if humanity appeared weak to other alien civilizations that might be watching. "I'm sure," he said. "Wake them all." Walsh hesitated for a moment, then began entering commands into her console. Throughout Level 12, warning lights began to flash. Computer systems that had been dormant for decades started humming to life. In chamber after chamber, revival processes began. The soldiers of Protocol 7 were not ordinary military personnel. They were survivors of conflicts that had nearly destroyed human civilization. Each one had been selected not just for their combat skills, but for their ability to function in the darkest circumstances imaginable. Colonel Marcus Reeves had earned the nickname Ghost during the AI Rebellion, when he had spent 3 months behind enemy lines, living in the ruins of Detroit while artificial intelligences hunted him. He had survived by becoming something that was barely human, a predator that could track and kill machines designed to be superior to any biological life form. Sergeant Major Ana Santos had led the final assault on the Mars Independence Army's last stronghold. When her unit was pinned down by enemy fire, she had crawled through a ventilation shaft filled with poisonous gas for 2 hours to reach the enemy command center. She killed 17 separatist leaders with her bare hands before the rest surrendered. Captain Zhang Wei had served in the Resource Wars, fighting in the flooded ruins of Shanghai against corporate armies that used chemical weapons, banned by every civilized nation. He had learned to operate in environments so toxic that normal humans would die within minutes of exposure. These were humanity's monsters, and now they were waking up. Kane walked through the facility as the revival process continued. In each chamber, he could see the soldiers beginning to stir. Their bodies were covered in scars from old wounds and surgical modifications. Some had mechanical limbs or enhanced organs. Others had been altered in ways that were not immediately visible, but would become apparent when they began to move. The first to fully wake was Colonel Reeves. Kane watched through an observation window as the man who had earned the nickname Ghost sat up on his revival table. Reeves looked exactly as he had when he went to sleep 15 years ago. The cryogenic process had preserved him perfectly, along with all the modifications that made him one of the most dangerous humans who had ever lived. Reeves turned his head toward the observation window. His eyes were still the same pale blue that had haunted the nightmares of enemy soldiers, but now they held a question. Kane activated the intercom. "Colonel, this is Admiral Kane. You've been asleep for 15 years. We have a situation that requires your attention." "What kind of situation, sir?" Reeves' voice was exactly as Kane remembered it, calm, quiet, and somehow more frightening than any shout. "Hostile aliens have captured and are torturing human civilians, including a 16-year-old girl. They're broadcasting her suffering for entertainment across their empire." Reeves was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had not changed, but something cold had entered his eyes. "I see. How many hostiles are we dealing with?" "Unknown. Possibly millions. They have superior technology and believe humans are primitive and weak. Weapons? You'll have access to our latest military hardware plus some new toys we've developed since you went to sleep." "Team?" "Your old squad plus volunteers from the other units. About 10,000 total." Reeves nodded slowly. "Rules of engagement?" Kane had been dreading this question. The soldiers of Protocol 7 had been put to sleep partly because they had difficulty distinguishing between appropriate and excessive force. They knew only one way to fight: total warfare aimed at the complete destruction of the enemy. "Priority 1 is retrieving our people alive," Kane said. Priority 2 is sending a message that humanity is not to be underestimated. Understood, sir. What about collateral damage? Kane closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he knew he was crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. Whatever it takes, Colonel. These aliens think we're primitives who can be tortured for fun. Show them what primitives are really capable of. Reeves smiled, and Kane remembered why this man had given him nightmares even when they were on the same side. Yes, sir. It'll be good to stretch our legs again. Over the next several hours, the rest of Protocol 7 soldiers completed their revival. They were given briefings on the current situation, equipped with the most advanced weapons humanity could provide, and loaded onto stealth ships that could reach Zephyrian space undetected. As Kane watched the ships disappear into the darkness of space, he wondered if he had just saved humanity or doomed it. The soldiers he had awakened were capable of incredible violence, but they were also nearly impossible to control once they started fighting. He thought about Sarah Chen again, and about the message she had managed to send. The girl had no idea what she had set in motion. Her cry for help had awakened humanity's greatest weapons. The Zephyrians were about to learn that some primitives bite back. The Zephyrian outpost at Kepler Station was supposed to be impregnable. Located on the edge of their territory, it served as both an early warning system and a demonstration of their technological superiority. The station was protected by energy shields that could stop anything short of a star-going supernova, and its weapons could vaporize entire fleets. Commander Zethkol had been stationed there for 3 years without seeing any real action. His job was mostly to monitor the primitive species in nearby systems and report anything interesting to the High Command. It was boring work but safe and comfortable. That changed at 0347 station time, when every sensor on the station suddenly went dead. What's happening? Zethkol demanded as his crew scrambled to figure out what was wrong. I don't know, sir, replied his sensor technician. All external sensors are offline. Internal sensors show normal readings, but we're completely blind to anything outside the station. Get them back online immediately. And raise the shields to maximum power. Shields are already at maximum, sir. But I'm getting strange readings from the outer hull. Before Zethkol could ask what kind of readings, the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, bathing the command center in red light. But now half of his crew stations were offline, and the ones that still worked were showing impossible data. Sir, his communications officer said in a shaky voice, I'm detecting movement in the maintenance shafts. That's impossible. Those shafts are too small for our people to fit through. Yes, sir, but something is definitely moving in there. Zethkol was about to order a security team to investigate when the first explosion echoed through the station. It came from somewhere deep in the lower levels, followed by the sound of weapons fire. Security teams to level 7, he ordered, and someone figure out what's wrong with our sensors. But the security teams never made it to level 7. 3 minutes after the first explosion, Zethkol's communications officer reported that all security teams had stopped responding. What do you mean, stopped responding? I mean they're not answering their communicators, sir. The last transmission was from Team Leader Vorthon. He said... The officer paused, looking confused. He said something was hunting them in the dark. More explosions followed, each one closer to the command center. Zethkol could hear the sound of metal being torn apart, and the distinctive whine of energy weapons being fired. But he could also hear something else. Screaming. Sir, we need to evacuate, his second-in-command said. Whatever is attacking us, it's moving through the station faster than our people can respond. Zethkol was about to agree when the command center doors exploded inward. Smoke poured into the room, followed by shapes that moved too fast and too quietly to be Zephyrian soldiers. The first thing Zethkol noticed was that the attackers were small. They were the size of young Zephyrians, but they moved with a fluid grace that spoke of perfect physical conditioning. They wore black armor that seemed to absorb light, and their faces were hidden behind masks that looked like the skulls of some primitive predator. The second thing he noticed was how efficiently they killed his crew. The attackers moved through the command center like shadows given deadly purpose. They used weapons that Zethkol had never seen before. Projectile weapons that fired metal slugs at incredible velocity. Bladed weapons that could cut through Zephyrian armor like it was made of paper. And small explosive devices that they placed with surgical precision. In less than 30 seconds, every Zephyrian in the command center was dead except for Zethkol himself. He found himself on his knees with one of the attackers standing over him, a blade pressed against his throat. The attacker removed its skull mask, revealing a face that Zethkol recognized from intelligence reports. Human. But this was not like the soft, weak humans he had seen in the diplomatic records. This human's face was scarred and hardened by years of violence. Its eyes were the color of ice and held no trace of mercy. "You understand our language?" the human asked in perfect Zephyrian. Zethkol nodded, not trusting his voice. "Good. I'm going to ask you some questions, and you're going to answer them truthfully. If you lie to me, I'll know and you'll die badly. Do you understand?" Again, Zethkol nodded. "Where are the human prisoners being held?" I don't know about any human prisoners." The blade pressed deeper into his throat, drawing a thin line of blood. "Wrong answer. Let me rephrase the question. My name is Colonel Marcus Reeves, and I represent the Terran Defense Authority. 3 days ago, aliens matching your species' description captured a human diplomatic mission and began torturing them for entertainment. Where are they?" Zethkol's mind raced. He had heard rumors about something happening in the core systems, but he was just an outpost commander. He didn't have access to that kind of information. "I swear I don't know," he said. "I'm just stationed here to monitor local space. High Command doesn't tell me about operations in the core systems." The human studied his face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there must have convinced him that Zethkol was telling the truth, because he lowered the blade slightly. "How do you communicate with High Command?" "Hyperspace communicator in the main transmission room." "Show me." They walked through corridors filled with the bodies of Zethkol's crew. The humans had killed over 200 Zephyrians in less than 15 minutes, and they had done it so quietly that the station's automated systems had barely registered the attack. In the transmission room, Colonel Reeves activated the hyperspace communicator and forced Zethkol to establish a connection with Zephyrian High Command. When the connection was established, Reeves pushed Zethkol aside and spoke directly into the transmitter. "This is Colonel Marcus Reeves of the Terran Defense Authority. You have captured and are torturing human civilians. You have 72 hours to release them unharmed and return them to human space. If you do not comply, we will consider it an act of war." The response came back immediately. Laughter. "Primitive creatures," the voice said in Zephyrian. "You think your pathetic species can threaten us? We are broadcasting the suffering of your people across our empire. Soon, every civilized being in the galaxy will know that humans are nothing more than animals to be used for our amusement." Reeves was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft and pleasant, which somehow made it more terrifying than any shout. "I see. In that case, let me make sure you understand what you're dealing with. Commander Zethkol, please tell your superiors about what happened to your station." Zethkol looked around at the bodies scattered throughout the transmission room. His voice shook as he spoke. They killed everyone. 200 soldiers dead in 15 minutes. I never saw them coming. They moved through our defenses like they weren't even there." "And how many humans attacked your station?" Reeves prompted. I only saw a few dozen. 37 to be precise," Reeves said into the transmitter. 37 humans just destroyed your border station without suffering a single casualty. We did this to send a message. Release our people, or we will show you what happens when humans stop trying to be civilized." The Zephyrian voice on the other end had lost its amusement. "This is an act of terrorism. We will respond with the full force of our military." "Please do," Reeves said pleasantly. "I'm looking forward to meeting your military. Commander Zethkol will be returning to your space in one of your own ships. He will carry a detailed report of everything he witnessed here. I want you to share that report with every Zephyrian leader, military commander, and citizen. I want your entire species to understand what they're facing." Reeves turned to Zethkol. "You're going to tell them exactly what you saw here. You're going to tell them that this was just a demonstration and that we were being gentle. Do you understand?" Zethkol nodded frantically. "Good. And make sure they understand one more thing. We found you once and we can find you anywhere. Human space is not as defenseless as you thought. We've been fighting wars since before your species learned to make fire, and we've gotten very good at it." As Zethkol escaped in a small Zephyrian ship, he looked back at the outpost that had been his home for 3 years. The humans had left it mostly intact, but every single Zephyrian was dead. They had done it quickly and efficiently, like farmers slaughtering livestock. The message was clear. This was what happened when you hurt humans. And according to the human colonel, this was them being gentle. Zethkol set course for the nearest Zephyrian fleet base, carrying news that would change everything. The humans were not the primitive, helpless creatures the Zephyrian Empire had thought they were. They were something far worse. Behind him, the human ships disappeared into the darkness of space, already heading toward their next target. The hunt for Sarah Chen had begun, and the Zephyrians were about to learn why humans had spent so much of their history fighting wars against each other. It was because they were very, very good at it. Fleet Admiral Korthvex had commanded the Zephyrian Third Battle Fleet for 12 years, without losing a single engagement. His ships had conquered 7 star systems and brought 17 primitive species under Zephyrian control. He was considered one of the finest military minds in the Empire. That reputation was about to be destroyed by creatures he had never taken seriously. The message from Commander Zethkol had reached him 6 hours ago, along with detailed sensor recordings from the Kepler station attack. Korthvex had watched the recordings 3 times, and each viewing left him more disturbed. The humans had moved through the station like ghosts. They appeared on sensors for brief moments, then vanished again. They used weapons and tactics that seemed primitive but proved devastatingly effective. Most troubling of all, they had accomplished their mission without seeming to care about their own survival. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from colonies in 7 different systems. They're all reporting the same thing: human ships appearing without warning, attacking military installations, then disappearing again." Korthvex studied the tactical display. Red markers showed where human attacks had occurred across a region of space, spanning nearly 50 light-years. The pattern made no sense according to standard military doctrine. The humans weren't trying to hold territory or establish supply lines. They were simply hitting targets and moving on. "What are our total losses?" he asked. 17 military installations destroyed, 43 ships lost, approximately 8,000 personnel killed or missing. The humans have suffered 0 confirmed casualties. 0 casualties. That was impossible according to everything Korthvex knew about warfare. Every battle had casualties on both sides. But somehow these humans were fighting like they didn't care about the basic laws of military engagement. "Sir," incoming message from the Veltheran system, his communications officer reported. "It's from Colony Administrator Genthak." "Put him through." The holographic image that appeared showed a Zephyrian administrator who looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usual composure was completely gone, replaced by barely controlled panic. "Admiral, you have to help us," Genthak said without any of the usual formal greetings. "They came out of nowhere. One moment our orbital defenses were operating normally, the next moment everything was exploding." "Calm down, Administrator. Tell me exactly what happened." "The humans, sir. They attacked our orbital shipyard without any warning. But they didn't fight like any military force I've ever seen. They used our own ships against us." Korthvex frowned. "What do you mean?" "They captured 3 of our patrol ships intact, then used them to approach the shipyard. Our people thought they were friendly vessels requesting docking permission. By the time we realized what was happening, the humans were already inside our defensive perimeter." "How did they capture the patrol ships?" "We don't know, sir. The ships simply went silent during their routine patrol. 3 hours later, they returned and requested normal docking procedures. Everything seemed normal until they opened fire at point-blank range." Korthvex felt a chill run down his spine. The humans were using Zephyrian identification codes and following standard procedures. That meant they had either forced Zephyrian personnel to cooperate, or they had learned to operate Zephyrian technology in just a few hours. "What happened to the crews of the patrol ships?" Genthak's image flickered as the transmission was disrupted by some kind of interference. When it stabilized, his expression was even more frightened. "We found the ships after the attack, sir. The crews were—" He paused, swallowing hard. "They were still at their posts. Still alive. But they couldn't remember anything about the past 3 hours. It was like their memories had been selectively erased. That was impossible. Memory erasure required sophisticated neural manipulation technology that even the Zephyrians were only beginning to understand. How could primitive humans have mastered such techniques? "Administrator, I'm dispatching reinforcements to your system immediately. Hold your position," and the transmission cut off abruptly. Korthvex's communications officer tried to re-establish contact but got only static. "Sir," his sensor technician reported, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the Veltheran system. It looks like the orbital shipyard is exploding. Korthvek stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The Velthurin shipyard was one of the largest industrial facilities in the sector. It employed over 50,000 workers and could build entire fleets of warships. The idea that a handful of human raiders could destroy it was absurd, but the sensor readings didn't lie. The massive facility was breaking apart, its various sections spinning away into space as secondary explosions continued to tear it apart. "How many human ships were involved in the attack?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. Our sensors detected no human vessels in the system." "That's impossible. Ships don't just destroy themselves. Sir, we're receiving a message on an open channel. It's coming from the Velthuran system. Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was human, speaking clear Zephyrian with a slight accent. "This is Captain Jiang Wei of the Terran Defense Authority. We have destroyed your shipyard and eliminated your orbital defenses. Your colony administrators and military commanders are unharmed and will be released once you comply with our demands." Korthvex activated his own transmitter. "This is Fleet Admiral Korthvex. You are attacking civilian targets. This is a violation of all civilized rules of warfare." The human's laughter was cold and bitter. "Civilized rules? Your people are torturing our civilians for entertainment. You broadcast their suffering across your empire for fun. Don't talk to us about civilization. Those are military research operations conducted according to established protocols." "Military research," the human repeated. "Is that what you call it when you torture a 16-year-old girl? We have a different name for people who hurt children." There was something in the human's voice that made Korthvex's skin crawl. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was something colder and more dangerous. The sound of someone who had moved beyond normal emotions into a place where mercy and cruelty were simply tools to be used as needed. "What do you want?" Korthvex asked. "We want our people back. All of them. Alive and unharmed. You have 48 hours to comply. And if we refuse, then we continue what we started. This shipyard employed 50,000 of your people. We could have killed them all in the first 5 minutes of our attack. Instead, we gave them time to evacuate. We disabled their ships instead of destroying them. We're being merciful, Admiral. Don't mistake that mercy for weakness." The transmission ended, leaving Korthvek staring at his tactical display. In less than 12 hours, the humans had crippled an entire sector's defenses. They had done it with tactics he couldn't predict and technology he didn't understand. Worst of all, they were holding back. The human captain had made that clear. They could have killed 50,000 Zephyrians but had chosen not to. That restraint was somehow more terrifying than any display of brutality would have been. "Sir," his intelligence officer said quietly, "I've been analyzing the attack patterns. The humans aren't just striking randomly. They're targeting specific facilities, military bases, shipyards, communication hubs. They're systematically dismantling our ability to coordinate a response." "What about their ships?" "We still haven't gotten a clear sensor reading on their vessels. That's the problem, sir. I don't think they're using ships, at least not in the way we understand them. The attack profiles suggest much smaller craft, possibly single-person vessels that can somehow avoid our sensors." Korthvek studied the data his officers had compiled. The humans were fighting a war unlike anything in Zephyrian military doctrine. They used stealth and misdirection instead of overwhelming force. They struck at infrastructure instead of military targets. They captured equipment and personnel instead of simply destroying them. It was the kind of warfare that could only be developed by a species that had spent centuries fighting against its own kind. The Zephyrians had conquered primitive species with superior technology and overwhelming force. But the humans had learned to fight wars where victory went to the most cunning and ruthless combatants. "Sir, incoming priority message from High Command," his communications officer reported. The message was brief and to the point. "Negotiate immediate ceasefire. Return human prisoners. Full authority granted." Korthvek stared at the message in shock. In 12 hours, these primitive humans had forced the Zephyrian High Command to consider surrender. It was impossible, but it was happening. He activated his transmitter and broadcast on the frequency the humans had used earlier. "This is Fleet Admiral Korthvex to Captain Jiang Wei. We are prepared to discuss terms for the return of your personnel." The response came back immediately. "Excellent, Admiral. We'll be in touch soon with details. Oh, and Admiral, tell your people to be very careful over the next few hours. My colleagues are still hunting, and they don't like it when people try to hide from them." As if to emphasize the point, another red marker appeared on Korthvex's tactical display. Another military installation had gone silent. The humans were still out there in the darkness, and they were still hunting. Sarah Chen heard the explosions long before she saw her rescuers. She was strapped to the examination table in Veltar's laboratory when the lights flickered and the station shuddered around her. The Zephyrian researcher paused in the middle of attaching another electrode to her forehead. What was that? Veltar asked one of its assistants. Unknown researcher. Shall I contact security? Before Veltar could answer, the laboratory doors exploded inward. Smoke poured into the room, followed by figures in black armor who moved with deadly purpose. Sarah had never seen anything more beautiful in her life. The rescue happened so fast that she barely had time to process it. The humans cut through her restraints while simultaneously eliminating every Zephyrian in the room. They worked with practiced efficiency, covering each other's movements and communicating through hand signals. One of them, a woman with scars covering half her face, knelt beside Sarah's table. Sarah Chen? She asked in English. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. I'm Sergeant Major Santos. We're here to take you home. They carried her through corridors filled with smoke and the sound of distant weapons fire. Sarah caught glimpses of other rescued humans being helped along by their rescuers. Captain Williams was there, supported by 2 soldiers. Dr. Martinez was conscious but looked like he was in shock. The journey to the extraction point passed in a blur of emergency lighting and alien architecture. Sarah kept expecting Zephyrian forces to appear and block their escape, but the corridor seemed empty except for the occasional body. Where is everyone? She asked Santos. Dealt with, Santos replied grimly. The colonel doesn't believe in leaving enemies behind us. They reached a docking bay where human ships waited. As they boarded, Sarah saw a tall man with pale eyes directing the evacuation. She recognized him as the leader from his bearing and the way other soldiers deferred to him. Colonel. Reeves noticed her looking at him and approached her. Stretcher. Miss Chen, he said in a voice that was surprisingly gentle. I'm Colonel Reeves. Are you hurt? They did things to me, Sarah whispered. Experiments. They said it was for research, but they were enjoying it. Something cold and terrible flickered in Reeves's eyes. I know. We've seen the recordings they made. The people responsible will pay for what they did to you. How did you find us? You sent us a message, remember? It reached Earth and triggered protocols that brought us out of retirement. We came as soon as we could. Sarah wanted to ask what kind of protocols could mobilize such efficient soldiers so quickly, but exhaustion was overtaking her. As the human ships departed the Zephyrian station, she fell asleep for the first time in days. She woke up in a medical bay aboard what was obviously a military vessel. A human doctor was checking her vital signs while a nurse adjusted her IV drip. After days of alien faces and incomprehensible procedures, the sight of normal human medical equipment was overwhelmingly comforting. How do you feel? The doctor asked. Better, Sarah said, and realized it was true. Whatever the Zephyrians had done to her was beginning to fade now that she was safe. The colonel would like to speak with you, if you're up to it. He says it's important. Sarah nodded, and a few minutes later, Colonel Reeves entered the medical bay. He looked different than he had during the rescue. Less controlled, more troubled. Miss Chen, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. During your captivity, did the Zephyrians give you any information about their military capabilities? Troop movements, ship positions, anything like that? Sarah thought back to her time in the laboratory. Veltar, the one who was experimenting on me, it liked to talk while it worked. It said something about the main fleet being called back to defend the capital world. Reeves nodded grimly. That matches our intelligence. Sarah, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. My soldiers and I came here to rescue you and send a message to the Zephyrians, but the situation has escalated. What do you mean? The Zephyrian military has mobilized their entire fleet to stop us. They're moving ships from every sector of their empire toward their capital world. It's the largest concentration of military force in their history. Sarah didn't understand why he looked so troubled. But that's good, right? If they're scared enough to call back their whole fleet, they'll think twice before attacking humans again. That's the problem, Reeves said quietly. My soldiers aren't good at thinking twice. They see that fleet concentration as a target of opportunity. They want to eliminate the entire Zephyrian military capability in one decisive battle. Would that be wrong? Reeves was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, the soldiers who rescued you aren't normal military personnel. We're survivors of wars that nearly destroyed human civilization. We were put to sleep because we were too dangerous to live among normal people. He walked to the medical bay's viewport and stared out at the stars. The wars we fought taught us that there are two kinds of conflicts: the ones you win completely, and the ones that come back to destroy you later. When we see an enemy, our instinct is to eliminate it entirely. Sarah began to understand what he was trying to tell her. You're going to destroy them all, aren't you? Unless someone gives us a reason not to. The Zephyrian fleet will reach their capital world in 18 hours. When it does, we'll attack. It will be the largest space battle in galactic history. And when it's over, the Zephyrian Empire will cease to exist as a military power. But they've agreed to return our people. The war's over. For diplomats and politicians, maybe. But soldiers like us don't stop fighting until the enemy can never threaten us again. Reeves turned back to face her. Unless someone convinces us that mercy is strategically sound. Sarah realized that he was asking her to make a choice. As the victim of Zephyrian cruelty, her opinion carried weight with these soldiers. If she said the word, they would show mercy. If she remained silent, they would do what they had been trained to do: eliminate the threat completely. What happens if you destroy their fleet? She asked. The Zephyrian Empire fragments into dozens of smaller powers. Some of them might blame humans for what happened and spend generations planning revenge. Others might decide that any species capable of such destruction should be left alone. It's impossible to predict. And if you show mercy, the Zephyrians remember that humans can be reasoned with. They're more likely to honor future agreements because they know we could destroy them if we chose to. But we don't have to. Fear and respect instead of fear and hatred. Sarah thought about Veltar and the other Zephyrians who had tortured her for fun. Part of her wanted them all to pay for what they had done. But she also thought about the thousands of Zephyrian civilians who would suffer if their empire collapsed into chaos. Colonel, can I ask you something? Of course. When you were fighting those wars on Earth, did anyone ever show you mercy when they could have destroyed you? Reeves smiled for the first time since she had met him. Once or twice. Those are the enemies I learned to respect. Then show them mercy. Not because they deserve it, but because we're better than them. Reeves nodded slowly. Very well, Miss Chen. But understand that this mercy comes with conditions. The Zephyrians will return not just your people, but every human in their territory. They will pay reparations for what they did to you, and they will never again threaten human civilians. What if they refuse? Then we remind them that mercy is a choice, not a weakness. 6 hours later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the human command ship as it approached the Zephyrian capital world. The enemy fleet was massive. Over 3,000 ships arranged in defensive formations around their homeworld. It should have been an impressive sight, but Sarah noticed that the human officers seemed almost bored by it. Colonel, the ship's captain reported, the Zephyrians are requesting to negotiate surrender terms. Tell them we'll accept nothing less than unconditional surrender and full reparations. And make sure they understand that this is the only offer they'll receive. The negotiation took less than an hour. The Zephyrians agreed to every human demand without argument. They returned all human prisoners, paid massive reparations, and signed treaties that essentially made them a client state of Earth. As Sarah watched the Zephyrian fleet stand down, she realized that the most important victory had not been military. It was the decision to show mercy when they had the power to choose vengeance. Colonel Reeves approached her as the formal surrender ceremonies began. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For reminding us that we're still human. My soldiers and I have spent so long fighting that we sometimes forget there are other ways to win. Sarah looked out at the Zephyrian ships, surrendering one by one. What happens now? Now we go back to sleep. Our job is done, and the galaxy is a little safer than it was before. Will I see you again? Reeves considered the question seriously. I hope not, Miss Chen, because if you see us again, it means something terrible has happened to humanity. As the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, Sarah thought about the message she had sent from her cell. She had asked for help, and Earth had sent its monsters to save her. But more importantly, when those monsters had the chance to destroy their enemies completely, they had chosen mercy instead. It was a choice that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come.